You guys got in Virat and Anushka. And then they got married. And then those ads are still playing on Instagram. You generated more profit than H&M and Zara combined.
For majority of our journey, we were a bootstrap company. This company is, by the way, never required investment.
Ravi Modi, India के one of the youngest billionaires में से एक है.
Manyavar was on its growth path, but Ravi Modi wanted more.
So we learned that without reaching the consumer, we will not be able to achieve the height that we were looking for.
In 3 years, he could afford a Mercedes, and when he started, he was struggling with 10,000 rupees. So how did he achieve that massive growth in 3 years?
The whole philosophy that we create, anyone walking in is a god for us.
So what is the typical investment that an investor has to make to get a Manyavar franchisee?
That would be a number closer to.
What was so special about Manyavar the brand that you went on to become a very big brand and others couldn't?
At this point in our life cycle, almost completely driven by algorithms and AI.
After Virat and Anushka endorsed your brand, did you see a huge uptick in sales? Hi everybody, Manyavar is one of the most legendary brands in the Indian market, and what started as a small store in Calcutta has now transformed into a 30,000 crore company with 600 stores all across the country. All of this is because of Ravi Modi's genius business strategies, which are a combination of data analytics, incredible marketing and a brilliant franchise strategy. And today we have the pleasure of listening to all of it from the son of Manyavar's founder, Vedant Modi himself. Now, I consider myself to be very lucky to call Vedant a dear friend and a brother. And this episode is literally us chatting for 2 hours trying to understand the genius of Ravi Uncle, who's the founder of Manyavar. So take out your pen and paper because this is literally a masterclass on how to turn a traditional store into a 1,000 crore company. Also guys, this episode has taken a lot of work and cost to produce, and we are able to bring this episode to you only because of the kind support of our wonderful sponsors Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software which has a magical solution for your store operations. Odoo has a solution to all your pain points like long order histories, chaotic staff schedules and sales tracking. And we understand that all of these things can feel like a never-ending headache. But here's where Odoo's point of sale comes in. With Odoo's point of sale, you can access complete order histories within just a few seconds. Odoo's POS helps you search by customer, product and date. It effortlessly manages staff schedules and monitors performance so that your team can stay aligned and motivated. It also monitors your stock in real time and manages inventory across multiple locations effortlessly. For franchisees, it helps you oversee sales and manage stock from a single intuitive interface. Plus, your customers can use self-service with Odoo. They can place orders and make payments on their own through their smartphones. With Odoo point of sale, you can turn confusion into clarity and you can simplify your shop's operation and focus on what really matters. So if you find this useful, start your journey with Odoo today. And the best part is that Odoo offers free lifetime access to your first application along with unlimited hosting and support. So check out Odoo from the link in the description and download Odoo now. You are the son of a billionaire now. But today everybody knows you as Vedant Modi, son of Ravi Modi. But then you have seen Ravi Uncle do everything from scratch.
Right.
So, and I was just looking at some stat and I just realized that in India, Zara does a profit of, wait a second, I'll just tell you the figures. I don't know if you've seen these figures by the way, bro. So in FY24, Zara generated a profit of 244 crores. H&M generated a profit of 43 crores. Both of them combined generated a profit of 287 crores. But Manyavar generated a profit of 414 crores. So you generated more profit than H&M and Zara combined. But this is the glorious part.
Right.
But what I want to understand is the fundamental reason why Ravi Uncle became so successful that today everybody is talking about him.
You know, I think this requires a lot of context to answer. So, the way Manyavar started is my dad started going to my grandfather's retail store, which was a 150 square feet retail store in AC Market in Kolkata. We used to sell everything related to men's apparel. So it was a ready-made apparel store. So he had a few insights when he started going there as a salesman at the age of 13. He realized that the salesmen who were already there would judge a customer even before they entered. And that gave him his first learning, which is no customer is, can be judged. But some are just easy, some are more difficult. So that is how he started to look at people walking in. The second, sort of insight that he had is understanding their tastes and preferences was key to managing a good supply chain.
Okay.
And the third big thing which he realized is that every salesman back in the day would offer a discount within the first 5-10 minutes of their conversation.
Okay.
And while they were trying to gain the trust of their guests, what was actually happening psychologically is that the guest was actually thinking that, okay, maybe they have more margins and that means I have to get a bigger discount out of them. And that actually led to lesser conversion rates. So our company actually is built on the insights of his time at the store. And he personally dealt with more than 100,000 consumers from the age of 13 till he was 22.
Wow.
So this, I think, is unheard of in the retail space where the founder or the entrepreneur themselves has the knowledge of dealing with 100,000 consumers. Now, we'll get to the story of how Manyavar started, etc. But just to, kind of get back to your question of where does the profitability comes from? It comes from efficiency. What I mean by efficiency is we understand at a pin code level what people in those particular pin codes prefer to wear. Our design teams, our supply chain teams, our inventory teams are all focused in ensuring that we create the right product for what guests of that particular pin code want. And we don't have a philosophy saying that Vedant likes this design, or my dad likes this design, or our creative director likes this design, so we will make this design. Our philosophy is what our guest will love, we focus on making those designs. And we've created our entire supply chain on this core backing of data. And I'm happy to get deeper into this topic. But what that has allowed us to do is we've created a brand that has never sold a single product on discount.
Wow.
So Manyavar in its entire history has not sold a single product on discount. We price the product very rightly on the very first day. And that gives our guests the confidence that the price is correct. And the second thing, which is the largest achievement or the USP of the company in some sense, is that we have less than 3% dead stock. Regardless.
Less than 3%?
Correct.
What are you saying, bro? And what are the industry standards?
So typically in the industry, the way things work is 30% of your product would end up going on large discounts, 30 to 40% of your product. And after that, you would be left with 15 odd percent of discount. So at a blended level, if you look at it, 30% or dead stock, if you take the discounting part of it in this equation as well.
Okay. Bro, how is this possible? You're talking about preference pin code wise.
Correct.
How do you do that?
Now, the way I'll actually give you the caveats of where this all started from. Right. So when we started off in 1999, we were primarily selling to multi-brand outlets and mom and pop stores across the country.
Bro, can you please explain multi-brand outlets, exclusive brand outlets and mom and pop stores for the audience?
Sure. So the way multi-brand outlets function is these are retail stores. You'll definitely have some in your neighborhood. And these people typically purchase from different brands across the country. Some of the brands that they keep are organized brands. Some of the brands that they keep are unorganized. And a multi-brand outlet can be an unorganized store and it can go all the way to being a really fancy store as well.
Like Shopper Stop.
Like Shopper Stop. A mom and pop store is just a smaller MBO, right? Shopper Stop today, actually, technically we start calling it large format stores.
Large format stores.
Correct. Even though they are MBOs in some sense, the larger retailers are now called large format stores. And that's the sort of audience we were selling to in the early days. In 2006, we got the opportunity of setting up our shop in shop within Central when they came to India.
Shop in shop.
Yeah, so it's basically setting up a small store within a multi-brand outlet like Central.
Okay, shop in shop.
Correct. And this, the advantage that it gives you is you get to get real-time data because the brand is the one that puts in the fashion advisor, and it's the brand's point of sale system that is able to get all the data in real time from these, locations. So for the first time, we were available as a shop in shop sometime in 2006.
2006. Got it.
Now, what we realized, and this is the first time we were getting actual consumer data. What we realized is that two sizes, large and XL, were selling in double the proportion of the other sizes that we used to sell at that time.
Okay.
But every single multi-brand outlet was buying small, medium, large, XL in equal proportions. So that led us to the fundamental question that must mean that they have a higher dead stock in the sizes that sell less.
Correct.
So we asked, some of our top multi-brand outlets that, can you guys please confirm if this is true? So everyone said, no, that's not the case. Everything sells equally. Then we requested our top multi-brand outlet partners to do an audit with our product to see what their inventory is. And they realized that small and medium was actually double in inventory versus large and XL, meaning that they were selling slower. That led us to the fundamental thinking that no one in India, the largest of retailers, were not acting basis data. And if we truly had to create the best of retail experience, which means having the right product at the right time, we need to be functioning on data. So our first learning was that size is also not something people are getting right in the stores.
Nothing is obvious.
Nothing is obvious, right? So we started thinking that we need to get into exclusive brand outlets. Now, exclusive brand outlets is basically when a brand like Manyavar launches an exclusive brand outlet. In that store, the entire experience is owned by the brand. And that brand is the only one that is present in that particular store. So we launched our first EBO in 2008.
2008.
With the very first EBO, our mindset was very clear that there is no human that can understand the tastes and preferences of thousands of people walking into a store.
Right.
This has to be done through an algorithm. So in 2008, we first created our inventory replenishment algorithm.
Inventory replenishment algorithm.
Correct. Now, this algorithm in the early days had simple data. It had things like sizes, it had things like colors, it had categories. So it would see, okay, a store that we opened in Bhubaneswar, for example, sells 40% medium, 30% large, and a mix of other sizes. So it would ensure that inventory is maintained in a way where we are able to, serve our guests walking in proportionately. And then we move to things like colors. And we are now in 2024 at a depth where it's completely artificial intelligence backed. Every single product that we have in our ecosystem is defined in 30 to 40 ways.
30 to 40 ways. Can you
So,
walk me through those ways? Because I was just about to ask you, कि भाई, when it comes to size, color, category, price, ये सब तो simple data points है.
Correct.
But you guys have such complex designs, और उस
Absolutely.
designs को क्या बोलते हैं वो भी मुझे पता नहीं है. Right? And I as a customer, I am buying out of those designs.
Yeah.
So 30 to 40 data sets क्या collect करते हो आप?
I mean, it's the simplest of things. So I'm wearing a Manyavar kurta right now. And the things we capture is what is the type of collar, the kind of button used, the kind of embroidery put into this. Is it thread? Is it chikankari? What's the fabric of the material from the outside? What's the fabric of the material from the inside? So basically, everything about a product that a guest can sense and a machine can read. So that's the way we think of, making products understandable for systems. And this is, by the way, completely made in-house, the entire supply chain tech. So our systems now understand at a pin code level what someone in Patna likes versus what someone in Lower Parel likes versus what someone in Malad likes. And the very interesting thing, India as a country our religion, our culture, our tastes, our preferences, our languages, everything changes every 50 kilometers. So if I give you Bombay as an example, even our Lower Parel store has very different inventory compared to our Borivali store because the tastes even change within the city. And those are the data points that we work on to ensure that every design we create is based on consumer preferences of a particular locality and is able to serve that particular guest walking in.
Very interesting. I'll tell you an interesting anecdote. For my engagement, I literally bought every single thing from Manayvar.
Amazing.
From the same store. Okay. So Teju and I, there's a store in Pimpri and then there is a store at the heart of Pune. Pimpri is closer to us. But we still went to that Pune store because that Pune store, we believed, had those designs that we wanted. Okay, and that's when I was wondering that if Manyavar is a brand and they have multiple stores, they must have the same stock, right? But Teju said no, they don't have the same stock. You should go to Pune only. So we went to Pune, and bro, you won't believe, we walked in and walked out within a span of 35 minutes. That's it. And that is because that store somehow had very less choices and had the most accurate choices versus a 3-4 story building जहाँ पे इतने सारे कुर्ते रखे रहते हैं भाई मेरा दिमाग खराब हो जाता है I'm a terrible shopper. You put me into a store, I will walk out of that store in 30 minutes even if I don't buy anything, even if it is the most important occasion, because I just can't shop. But when it comes to Manyavar, the reason why I often choose Manyavar is because it's simple, clean, and the staff is so educated that I go and tell Kaka कि Kaka ये 2-4 चीजें मैं देख रहा हूँ, मुझे please इसमें से कुछ दिखा दो. And that Kaka shows me 5 to 6 designs, and I often end up choosing one of them. That is so interesting. So, and then I realized when I looked at the store while Teju was shopping, I walked around and I looked at the store and I realized that यहाँ पे variety कम नहीं है, बहुत ज़्यादा है. It's just that the staff is also so educated that they're able to bring me whatever I ask them and they're able to understand my language even without me using the vocabulary of designs like chicken curry, collar or color or whatever that is. And that's what got me thinking, how is that even possible? And that is how I got in conversation with Ayush. And that's how Ayush introduced me to you. And that's why we're doing this podcast. It stems from that question. But my question over here is, bhai, when it comes to India, like you said, every 50 kilometers, the taste changes. But when you started, you had just one store, right?
Right.
So how did you take this leap of having multiple stores, then doing the trial and error, and then deciding on which inventory will do well? Because it's a pretty complex process, right?
Absolutely. So actually the advantage we had is with our learnings, we changed our model in the very early days.
Okay.
So the way typical brands work in India is you do a trade show. In the trade show, all multi-brand outlets, large format stores end up coming and they choose the product that they want.
No, trade show क्या होता है?
Trade show is an event that you hold with all your designs for the season.
Okay.
And people come in and saying, okay, I like this kurta, I like this kurta, you write 200 pieces for me, you write 300 pieces for me.
Oh, these people are the retailers.
These people are the retailers, correct.
Okay.
So that's a trade show. We realized very early on if we want to truly disrupt, and the best part is, if you ever meet my dad, what you'll realize is my dad is probably one of the best data slash mathematician mindset sort of a guy you'll ever meet. Everything that works in his brain is on the basis of data. And what that, kind of allowed us to do is we were one of the only brands, and maybe we are one of the only brands still even today, that makes the inventory first and then takes the order, because we understand what people will order.
Okay. Can you walk me in detail through that concept of making the inventory after you take the order, before you take the order, you said, right?
Correct.
So what do you mean by you make the inventory before you take the order?
So the way most brands work, you come in and you write an order, and then they will order the fabric, they'll go on to creating those products. the way we function is we, using our algorithms, started guesstimating back in 2002, 2003 what products people are going to order because we had that multi-brand outlet data. And what that allowed us to do is create much faster timelines of supplying. So if a typical brand was taking 120, 130 days, because we were already creating everything in our inventory, we could supply it to you in a matter of a month. So that advantage that we created was huge in the early days. And that enabled us to start thinking of supply chain from a data perspective. So we started realizing what multi-brand outlets across the country were, sort of purchasing. And that was the first basis of, thinking of what the consumer preferences of that particular locality would be.
Got it.
But to be very honest with you, the journey in the early days was not easy at all.
Okay.
Because one thing which we covered is most multi-brand outlets don't function on data.
Yeah.
They function on the tastes and preferences of the guy who's coming to order. That's how most of them are functioning even today. Hence, we got it right in some places, we got it wrong in some places, but with time, this system became really strong.
So bro, you were telling me that MBO जब आपके पास ऑर्डर्स प्लेस करते हैं तो वो एमबीओ का जो ओनर है या जो ऑर्डर प्लेस कर रहा है उसके टेस्ट की प्रेफरेंस के हिसाब से वो ऑर्डर प्लेस करते थे एंड दे वर नॉट यूजिंग डेटा सो कैन यू टेल मी व्हाट आर द डेटा पॉइंट्स दैट यू यूज which the MBOs don't even consider, which helps you maintain this 3% dead stock?
Like we were, kind of talking about, this is every single thing about a product.
Okay. Can you walk me through the details of it?
Sure. So I'll give you one basic example. In South India, most people get married early in the morning wearing their regional attire. So a vesti, a pancha kacham. Now that means they are wearing white in the morning typically. So because of the influence of movies and the overall festivities that have increased, even in South Indian weddings, they have a reception in the evening. And in that reception, because they've worn white, they don't want to wear a white sherwani, which is the typical case for rest of India. Now, this is one data point that our systems automatically cover, saying that in South India, the color preferences are different. Versus in a Patna, there are certain nuances that require a certain color preferences. But on top of that, depending on the weather, the lining on the inside should change depending on the city. Depending on the culture, the thread work, the embroidery required changes. Depending on a different sort of a culture, things change basis how heavy or how light you want to wear. And every single one of those data points is covered by our systems. And we ensure all the way from design to demand planning to inventory and store replenishments that these data points are being used to ensure the correct product is being created in the first place and being supplied to the correct store.
Interesting. So now you follow the FOFO model, right? Because of which you're able to supply all of your inventory directly to the store on the basis of what will sell in that particular store on the basis of the data that you have.
Correct. So we actually function on a very different sort of a FOFO model versus anyone else in the country.
Perfect. So can you please walk me through the different franchise models first, and then let's come to your model.
Sure. So, there are basically multiple types of model. There is COCO, which is when a company operates its store and it is also the owner of that particular store. So everything is run by the company end to end. Then there is a company-owned franchisee-operated model. So this model basically means it's the company that is putting in the capex, paying the lease cost, but the franchisee is the one actually running the show on the front end. The third model is FOFO, which is where the franchisee owns the store, puts in the capex, and is also operating the store. And finally, there's also a franchisee-owned company-operated system where the franchisee is nothing but an investor in this case, and the company is the one running the entire show. We work with a model which is somewhere between a company-owned franchisee-operated and a FOFO model.
Okay.
Majority of our retail stores are under the company's lease.
Okay.
But operated by the franchisee partner. The reason we do this is if you understand India, it's a very complex country. The way products change every 50 kilometers, even the demands of the guest walking in from a particular retail experience change. I don't think it is possible to replicate an experience of this sort without having an entrepreneur at every single store. That's the power that franchisees bring to our company. Having entrepreneurs running the show from the front end creates a very different sort of an experience. And that is why people find the Manyavar in-store experience to be elevated, especially the people. The moment things are run by a corporate, they have to be standardized. There must be so many processes. I'll give you a small example. An AC breaks in a tier 3 city. You have to get approval from the company. It will take 2 days.
Correct.
1 day, 2 day. If it becomes too quick, there's a chance of a leakage. So there has to be a standard procedure. If you follow all of those, it will take 2 days. That means your consumers walking in have gone to a store without an AC. If you don't want that as a brand, you keep the store shut for 3 days. That's loss of revenue. It's only a franchisee that can take a call within 30 minutes, know the details in and out, and be able to manage that experience. That a company in India can not do for now. That's the
Decentralized
power.
decision making.
Exactly. And that's the power they bring. But what we've done is we've also standardized experience using technology and using our strengths. So the entire training part of the ecosystem is taken care by us. So every single fashion advisor that we have has their own mobile app where we train them on a daily basis about nuances of the new product, about nuances of how to give customer service, about nuances of Indian culture. It's very relevant that they understand the culture for which they are serving. And that entire training is one, run through a lot of technology. And number two, there's also a large team across India that does door-to-door training for every single store.
Door-to-door training.
Exactly.
Wow. What kind of trainings do they get? Like, what do you teach them and how do you teach them?
I think the largest part of our training is customer service. And if you noticed, even in this podcast, I rarely use the word consumer or customer. Sometimes I use it, but mostly you will find me using the word guest. So there are deep psychological things that we try to imbibe. We try to treat everyone walking in like a guest. And in India, we have a famous saying, Atiti Devo Bhava. And the whole philosophy that we create, anyone walking in is a god for us. And the guests have to be taken care of regardless of their demands and requests. And that's how we've tried to create our consumer culture across the board. And that's the first basic level of training, that how should you welcome someone, how should you service them, in case there are extra demands, how do you go out of your way to fulfill them. Then the second level of training is around product. How do you describe a sherwani? How do you describe a lehenga? How do you describe the nuances of a product? Then there are a lot of process related, health related trainings that are given. And then there's also a cultural layer that, so for example, why do most women in India wear a red lehenga? So if you look at history, you will find there's a large connect. So the red color lehenga actually is influenced by Ma Durga. So we teach them these cultural nuances as well, that when required, you can also educate people walking in about the cultures of the cultural values of India. And one very unique thing, I think, I'm not sure if you would have noticed this, is every time you walk into one of the Manyavar stores, you will be greeted by someone saying Namaskar Manyavar.
Yes.
And that if that Namaskar is delivered perfectly, 90% of the service is done there.
Wow.
That's what we truly believe. A special welcome, or welcome from the bottom of the heart, is really, really, really special.
Very interesting. Vedant, can you walk me through your franchise model? Let's say I am an investor and I'm a business owner and I want to associate with Manyavar. What is the process like? How much do I have to invest and what will be my role and what will be the role of Manyavar?
Sure. So the way our franchisee model works is the franchisees have to put in a capex into a particular store. So typically furniture would cost about 2,500 rupees to 3,000 rupees per square feet, depending on the location of the store. And then additionally, depending on the inventory we keep at your location, we take a security deposit. What that does is it covers our risk, but at the same time, it allows the franchisee to work on a much lower working capital.
Got it.
Right,
Can you explain that?
Sure. So typically, the way inventory works with most partners and most brands is if you have, let's say, 1 crore worth of inventory, you have to pay the entire amount in 60 days. The way we work is if we are keeping 1 crore worth of inventory, we will take approximately 25 lakh rupees from you and keep it as security deposit. And when product actually sells in real time, that's when you pay us.
Okay.
So that ensures that your working capital cycle is really smooth and it's as minimum as possible, leading to better ROIs. And then the franchisee is responsible for just two things in total: the upkeep and maintenance of the store, and ensuring that the best of consumer service is being delivered at the front end. The entire inventory, merchandising, replenishment piece is taken care by the company. We take care of training, visual merchandising, marketing, all of those aspects. And the franchise is only responsible to give the guests walking in the best of the time possible.
So, what is the typical investment that an investor has to make to get a Manyavar franchisee?
So it really depends on the location of the store. But now the average size of the store we're opening is about 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. So typically, including everything from capex to security deposit, that would be a number closer to 1 crore.
Very interesting. And do you help the business owner choose a particular location, or does the business owner himself have to take care of it?
So actually, the entire location choosing aspect is done by us.
Done by you,
Because
okay.
we again feel this is a very scientific process. And while you need to have a certain sense of understanding, majority of the things are very science driven here. So we have tools that help us understand the footfall of a particular location. Then we have different algorithms internally that help us understand the exact size of the store in a particular area that we should be opening. We also then get to finding the best store in that particular area in those size.
Got it. So, walk me through the typical process of finding this accurate location, because I am genuinely fascinated by real estate. And one of my very close friends' father, his name is Ansh, and uncle is like deeply involved in real estate. And in the past 2 months, we've kind of been taking classes from uncle, but how to choose a particular plot, how to choose the prime location, and so on and so forth. And what he told me is that every brand has a certain way of looking at prime locations. And if you can only understand how every brand looks at different definitions of prime locations, you will be able to spot a hidden opportunity.
Yeah.
So, how does Manyavar typically scout for a prime location, and what is Manyavar's definition of a prime location?
So, I mean, broadly, we have two kinds of markets we operate in. There are wedding markets. These are the big wedding markets. You have your Karol Bagh, there's Santa Cruz in Bombay, there's Commercial Street in Bangalore, T Nagar in Chennai, Park Street in Calcutta. There are these big wedding markets that everyone knows of. So, these are no-brainers for us. The goal here is to have the best property, the largest property by far. So, typically in these markets, the size and scale of our store would be 10x of the number 2 guy now. So that's the sort of scale we're trying to create in these core markets. When we look at non-wedding markets where we still see significant opportunity, there it all boils down to finding if our target audience is there in is available there with high footfalls. And that is a scientific process. So one is to understand what are the other brands in the area. Are they performing well? And the other method is to also study data from Google Maps, for example, to understand what's the footfall of a particular location.
You understand that from Google Maps?
So we have a tool that does that learning or uses Google Maps data
Got it.
to throw the information to us, and it ranks the probable best locations of a city.
Wow.
And then we have a team that goes there to find out if this location is correct for a brand like ours. And at the same time, then when you're within the market, it boils down to finding the property with the highest visibility and the best facade, which is what, in our opinion, is the best marketing possible.
Got it. So high footfall. Based on your database, you look for where your customers shop from. You use Google Maps data and then
Absolutely.
on-ground research.
Absolutely.
Is that correct? Okay.
And try to find the property with the best facade, which is the trickiest piece in this equation. Getting the market right is relatively easier compared to finding the right property in this market.
What do you mean by that?
Let's say we've identified that Santa Cruz is a good market for us. Now, which store in Santa Cruz? Finding the people who have an available store. The actual execution of finding that store is really tricky, and it's becoming trickier by the day.
Very interesting. So do you buy these stores or do you lease them?
We lease all our stores, and I think for us, the business point of view is simple here. That even Nikhil Kamath said this many times, that if you look at the rental yield curve in India, it's still not inverted.
Correct.
And interest rates are better with your capex than rentals today. So we don't see the point of buying property today in India. Renting is just the more capital efficient form of working. It lets us as a company remain very asset light, and with franchisees opening stores and majority of the stores being on lease, it allows us to grow rapidly without the need of any capital.
And you pay for the lease every month.
Correct.
Okay. But Vedant, tell me something. Doesn't that put your brand at risk? क्योंकि मान लो आपने एक स्टोर ले लिया लीज पे. Okay. How long is the lease? Is it a 3-year lock-in or a 5-year lock-in?
So typically what we're able to do is have a 9-year lock-in from the landlord. And typically from a brand's perspective, it's a 2 to 3-year lock-in.
So you can leave in 2 to 3 years.
Correct.
But he has to give the store to you for 9 years.
Correct. And there are some clauses in agreements. So let's say there can be a slight increment in the rent post 5 years, which is already committed at the start of the contract. So
Okay.
the contract has multiple different methodologies, but typically 9 years is comfortable to get as a lock-in.
Okay. But after 9 years, let's say the landlord says, I don't want to rent this property out to you. Then you'll have to go and look for another property. But until that point, for example, now I exactly remember where my Manayvar store is. If that Manayvar store is relocated to someplace else, that means a loss of business and loss of customer, right? So how do you factor in that risk and solve for it?
I mean, to be frank with you, this risk would never exist if you pay the landlords on the first day of the month.
Acha.
Because in India, the moment someone realizes that a brand is paying them on time every single month, in years like COVID, if a brand is paying a landlord on time, that's the trust that they need.
Got it.
And if you're doing that, they will want to continue being with you. They won't want the headache of having a challenge with a new person. So I think we've never really faced a challenge in renewing contracts, and we've now renewed a lot of our large stores.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And do you guys pay a premium on top of the market rates or do you guys pay market rates?
Definitely, I think we try to run an efficient company. So we pay market rates. But if a store, let's say the low apparel store that we have bang opposite Palladium Mall, that sort of a facade demands a premium of its own. So in our perspective, that's market rate. But if you do a per square feet calculation, that might look like a market rate plus premium.
Got it. Makes sense. Bro, now let's go back to 1999 to Ravi Uncle when he started the company. So you were born in?
I was born in 1999 as well. So interestingly, both me and the company were actually born in the same month in 1999.
Okay. So you were named after the company or the company was named after you?
I actually have no idea.
Okay. We should ask Uncle then. ठीक है. Tell me something. From the age of 5 or 6, you've been watching Uncle go to the store. And when did you start going to the store?
So, when I was born, this was the time of hustle. Both my parents were involved in the business. I have been the only child. And so naturally, every day after school, I would end up going to the office. So I've grown up playing cricket with people in the factory. And I've grown up doing my homework alongside the accounts department doing their work. So my life was always at work. So it was a very interesting culture growing up. So I still remember, one of I was given small things to do. So we started creating email IDs, I think back in 2001 or 2002. And no, sorry, this would be 2003 or 2004. I was maybe a 4-5-year-old guy. I always like text. I was given, जाके सबका email ID बनाओ. So
सबका email ID is in किसका?
everyone who used to work for us in
Okay.
the accounts team,
Got
in the
it.
finance team.
Email IDs बनाया सब लोगों का.
So I was given these interesting things to do. And then when I got slightly older, you know, I was like, let's say at that time when Nintendo had come out, I was like, Dad, I want this one Game Boy. He said, Vedant, if this particular store, which is close to our house, does this amount in these couple of months, you'll get your Nintendo.
Okay.
So he started making a lot of things, business driven for me.
He gave you a sales incentive.
Correct.
At the age of?
I must be 11, 12 at this point.
Wow.
And so that was very interesting. So I started going to the stores every day after work, started gaining a lot of insights. And it was a crazy time. I had a lot of fun. But there's also a very funny story there. When I was 15, my class 10 board exams were coming. And this time I was like really involved with the store near our house, and I had the financial year targets to meet. And in March, when I'm supposed to prepare for the class 10 board exams, I was actually spending more time in the store. My mom got so pissed at me
Okay.
that she said, you actually have to go abroad and study now for a couple of years. And that's when I, sort of decided to go to Switzerland for my 11, 12, and then went to university outside as well.
भाई 10th standard में board exam पढ़ने के बजाय financial targets. I'm just imagining that there's a kid, let's call this guy Prakash. Prakash is asking, Vedant is asking, what's up with you, bro? So Prakash says, bro, I just got this new Game Boy. What's up with you? I'm just meeting my financial targets. Bro, that must have been crazy. So tell me something, like, were you the only one in the school who was doing it, or were the other kids also like this only?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think others were doing things like these.
Only you had the pressure of financial targets.
No, I actually loved it. I had no pressure. I was working without pressure.
Okay.
It was genuinely, I still think, and a lot of people will find me actively standing at a store and serving guests on a lot of weekends. It's still my favorite part of the job.
So what did you do when you were 5 and 6, when you went to the store? You had a good time. You were a kid back then.
Yeah, this time it was in the office and the factory. I wasn't going to the store.
Okay.
I was going to the corporate location.
Okay. So when you went to the store later, what did you do in that store? What did you change? What were your observations?
I mean, my observations were around understanding consumer preferences. I think that whole judgmentality of someone walking in and a salesman thinking that this guy will buy, this guy will not. This guy will buy for this much, not for that much. I think my role enabled them to completely remove this discrimination from their head. And those were my early learnings. And with time, we've tried to create an organization that doesn't have any of these biases with people walking in. We truly believe in not having this. So I think this was one big learning. Then there were smaller learnings. And because this is the really early days of a retail, this is like 1 or 2 years into doing exclusive brand outlets, there were a lot of supply chain learnings. What colors are we missing on? For example, we realized that plus sizes could be a good part of the business. So we started keeping plus size inventory for the first time. So that added a lot of growth to some of the stores. So there were very small insights that led to a few percentage point growths every single year. And at the same time, the fun was actually dealing directly with the guests. That was the fun part of it, because when a family is coming to you and giving you the trust and the respect of being the person to create clothes for their wedding, it's a very special feeling, and you want to ensure that everything goes right. There is no scope of anything going wrong.
But when you were 15, 16, didn't people look at you and say, ye to bachcha hai?
Yeah, that used to happen. That used to happen a lot. But I think I knew how to kind of get around that. The moment they saw me describing the product, that's when they thought it's okay. some people would think there's child labor happening as well. And I had to actively tell them that, no, I've been to my school. This is my real school. This is where I'm actually learning. So I had to explain them that piece. But yeah, it was...
Very interesting, man. Did you tell them that you owned the store?
I tried to not say it because, like I mentioned, we don't give any discounts and ensure that pricing is perfect on day one. And if they know that I own the store, then that puts in that added pressure of giving a discount. So me just being a relative or someone of the franchisee family makes my life easier.
Interesting. What was your father like when you were 5 and 6? Because back then, that was his hustling phase, right? So what was he like during that time?
I think my dad is the most logical, caring person I know in my life. And even though he was really hustling, he always had time for me and time for the family. So I think his success is not defined by the company he created, but his success is truly defined by having created this company alongside giving the family enough time and always being there for anyone who needed him. And that's not like limited to me or my mom. That's goes to his sisters, goes to my mom's family, goes to some people of our extended family. So I think that is something that truly creates who he is. But he's also a very introverted person. He doesn't like to meet anyone publicly. I wish I can get him to do a podcast someday with someone, but I've tried. I don't think it's possible, at least in this generation. So yeah, he's a very, very different sort of a person. And one interesting thing he did with me is, I think as a toddler, he had this habit of coming back and talking about work to me. You know how sometimes when you are an entrepreneur that is building a business in an industry where no one else really is operating, you feel very lonely. And I think he took out that loneliness of an entrepreneur by discussing things with me. Back when I was really young, I probably didn't have anything to say back. But just hearing him out probably made him feel more comfortable and gave me the immense learning of, the kind of things I do in business all stem from the learnings that I had as a kid.
Interesting.
And those dinner conversations in a Marwadi family are actually a true thing.
What
at
are
least
they
in
like,
our
bro?
household.
What are they like? What do you discuss at your dinner table?
Anything and everything.
Let's take the latest dinner that you had with your dad. What did you talk about?
I think the latest dinner I had with dad was around how should the algorithms that we have on our e-commerce websites account for both preferences of online and offline guests. Because one challenge we face as a company is that even though our online presence is big from a marketing perspective, majority of the sales are driven offline. So how do you create the product listing page algorithms to ensure that you're not just focusing on what people are clicking online, but what they're also buying offline?
Interesting. So it's more about problem solving.
Correct. So our dinner conversations are mostly around talking about what I did during the day, taking help or directions from him into how I can think better about this problem. And what he'll do is he will never give me an answer, to be honest. He will never give me an answer. He will give me one line and that will just unlock a whole dimension of thinking about that problem.
Interesting.
And it will just lead me to solve the problem the next day.
Wow.
And he speaks very less, by the way.
Acha.
He will not talk about things he does not completely understand at all. If he understands something completely, he will give you just a one-liner answer. But that one-liner will be so impactful that it will change your complete thinking about that particular, sort of a problem.
Did he always think about building such a big brand? Because there are so many shops out there. In fact, my close friend Ansh, he owns a shop at Chandni Chowk. And Bharat uncle told me that at Chandni Chowk, there are people who sell lehengas for 30 lakh rupees and 40 lakh rupees and so on and so forth. But they are not brands that are known nationwide. And your father started with his father's retail store when he was 13 years old. And then he went on to build such a big brand. And your father started in 1999 when liberalization had just happened. It had just been 9 years. So India was not used to this kind of ambition. So where does this all stem from?
I think it's partly destiny and partly understanding the gap in the market. So in 1999, what happened is there was this one situation in the store in which my grandfather got really pissed off at my dad. My dad decided that he will never go back to the store again. Took 10,000 rupees from my grandmother and decided was the most important thing in his life. It was to earn some respect for himself. And that's where the brand name Manyavar comes from. Um, he was always a visionary, I would say. But I wouldn't say he thought that I want to create a brand with these many number of stores, eventually a house of brands, trying to enter everything in the Indian wear space. His thinking was very macro level problem solving oriented. He saw the problems that existed in the business today. He tried to solve them as fast as possible and move on to the next problem.
So what was the gap that he spotted?
The gap that he spotted is that Indian wear as a whole had become a very aristocratic product.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is if you had to buy a sherwani, you had to go to a tailor, you had to choose a fabric, you had to go back 4 or 5 times. You wouldn't know what your sherwani would come out looking like. So there was no organized player doing business in this space. It was too expensive, too time consuming. At that time, people in India didn't have time. I think majority of the country would be a 6 day, a week, 8-9 hours daily sort of a work routine.
Yeah.
Who could afford going to a tailor 5 times? That's where we saw the gap to, sort of say we will create organized Indian wear brand that creates ready-made products. So there was existing demand, but there was no supply.
Got it.
And that's where the true opportunity started coming from. I also want to narrate a story about how do you manage working capital. I think what you started off with is maximizing potential within our situation, right? And that's the beauty about Indian businesses. Now we are, for majority of a journey, we were a bootstrap company. This company is, by the way, never required investment. Even when we brought in private equity, it was solely for the learning and the experience that the investors would bring on the table, not for the money. It was always 100% bootstrap company. And I'll give you the caveat of what we were doing in the early days. So to manage 10,000 rupees of working capital, what he was doing is, there were two people who he had to spend money on. The first is the person we were procuring fabric from. So this person works on a 30-day credit period. And the second are the jobbers who are actually creating the kurtas on a daily basis. These people have to be paid daily. And this I'm reciting one of the examples from 1999 itself.
Okay.
Now, in order to manage 10,000 rupees, what he was doing is, he bought the fabric and everything he was making on a daily basis, he was selling a part of that on a loss to one of the brands that would pay you the moment you gave them the product.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
So back then it was Vishal Megamart, Pothys. These were two brands that would pay you the same day.
Okay.
So let's say if we were making product for 100 rupees, he was selling them at 90 just to ensure that we could pay the daily workers for that particular day.
Okay.
And the profit actually came from brands that would pay you 30 days later.
Okay.
And that money was used to give back to the fabric vendors.
Okay. But then he sold it at a loss, right? So where did the profit come from?
So he wasn't selling all of it to Vishal, Megamart and Pothys. He was only selling 30% of it or 40% of it
Got it. Got it.
to manage that day's working capital cycle.
Oh, interesting. So if I were to understand this from my context, and I'll just repeat what you just said, and you can correct me if I went wrong. So let's say he makes 10 pieces, 10 units. 3 are sold to Vishal Megamart or Pothys at a loss so that they can get the money, so that he can get the money on the same day itself. Then this money goes back to the people who have made the units so that they get paid. And the rest of the 7 units, they are sold to normal retailers at a profit. And that was his profit.
Absolutely.
Got it.
And that money, that money is then used to pay the fabric vendors at the end of that 1 month credit cycle.
Oh, got it.
So that is how, you could think of a business where even making a loss is important to creating profit at a month level.
Very interesting, bro. Very interesting. So we started doing this, and you did this for how long?
I mean, I think by 2002, the business had already scaled to a very decent level.
Okay.
By those standards. So doing about 3 crores, 4 crores turnover.
How did he achieve that? Because, like I said, I was reading that story where your father was about to buy a Mercedes.
Yeah.
Right? That was in 2002.
Correct.
And he said that the company started in 1999. In 3 years, he could afford a Mercedes. And when he started, he was struggling with 10,000 rupees. So how did he achieve that massive growth in 3 years?
So I think basically by really understanding the depth of how to manage working capital, that was the secret to the first 3 years of growth. On top of the efficiency in the product, in the quality of the product, in the brand that was created back in 99. So all of those things added up to the sales side of things. But the true growth actually came from his mathematics side of things and managing the working capital beautifully.
So how did he get hold of a store? Did he rent a store?
No, there were no stores. Till 2008, there were no
Okay.
EBOs.
So where did he sell?
He was selling to all these mom and pop stores, multi-brand outlets
With the name Vedant Fashions.
with the name Manyavar.
With the name
Vedant
Manyavar.
Fashions, yeah. Vedant Fashions was the company, the parent company, but the brand was Manyavar.
Got it. So Manyavar, he understood that India needs a brand back in 1999 itself.
Correct.
Wow. What was his inspiration?
He's a very, sort of a passionate guy. And like I mentioned, one of the most logical people. I can't tell you what was his inspiration, but I can tell you, his personality even in those early days. And this is a story that my grandmother tells me. So in class 9 or 10, I'm forgetting when, in the mathematics exam. No, sorry, my bad. This is not class 9 or 10. This is class 1.
Class 1.
This is class 1. So in class 1, in his mathematics exam, he got 100. And my grandmother, told him, "Acha hai, take a good work." And he wasn't happy with himself even then. So in his class 2 maths exam, he said, "I'll finish this paper earlier." So an hour of paper he tried to finish in 45 minutes. And he's tried to done that with every single mathematics exam all the way to his boards in class 12.
Okay.
Where he wants to finish a 3-hour paper in 1 hour 15 minutes, 1 hour 20 minutes and leave. And that's the speed he wants in life. So getting 100 is not enough. How can you finish it faster and still leave? I think so. He tries to test the boundaries of everything. And that's who he is as a person. It's also very difficult, if he's your boss in some way, because he always expects so much from you.
True.
He will always be there to comfort you with what you achieve, but he wants that extra from you as well, and for you to think that sky is the limit.
Very interesting. Then, when did you open your first store? You said in 2006.
So the first store was in 2008, the first
2008.
EBO. The first time we started getting data was in 2006 through an SIS.
Got it. Bro, मुझे एक बात बताओ कि जब अंकल ने ये शुरू किया था तब इतने सारे बिजनेसेस थे. जैसे मैंने आपको बोला कि चांदनी चौक में भी इतने सारे बिजनेसेस हैं, बट दोज बिजनेसेस डू नॉट एवर गो ऑन टू बिकम नेशनल ब्रांड्स. So, what is so special about Manyavar the brand? And in fact, what was so special about Manyavar the brand back in the early 2000s that you went on to become a very big brand and others couldn't?
So broadly, if you look at India and you look at our industry, you will find that at a city level, some brands did decently well. Then they scaled to becoming regional brands. And the moment people were at, let's say they went from 1 store to 10 stores in their city, they were doing decently well. But the moment they went to becoming a 50-store brand in their region, they started to fail. And that's primarily because of lack of focus on data and understanding of consumer preferences.
Okay.
And at the same time, a lot of retailers are not obsessed with the consumer. There's a certain sense of obsession with the guest that we have in our company. that we want to ensure the best levels of service that has allowed us to, number one, crack the needs of the guests walking in, and number two, also understand what they prefer in which part of the country.
Got it.
So having solved for these mechanisms as what has allowed us to become a pan-India brand with understanding of regional tastes and preferences.
So data and tech, basically.
Absolutely.
At scale.
At scale.
Because a lot of businesses have this data at a very small scale, like you said, 5 to 10 stores, but they're not able to scale it to 50 and 100 stores because...
No, the 5-10 store data is not being consumed at all is the challenge.
Oh, so you're saying they have data, but they're not processing it to make better decisions.
Some might not even be collecting that data.
Okay.
So data, you have to ensure that, number one, your attributes are mentioned. Number two, you're using a decent point of sale system for your billing. So there's a lot of layers to data collection as well. So they have access to collect data, but they're not. And in most cases, if they have the data, they're definitely not processing it in the way that this data needs to be processed in.
Interesting. So let's say there is a person who has an ethnic wear store. What do you think should be the first thing they should do to become a big brand like Manyavar? They should start collecting data. How should they start collecting data? What are the first few steps that they're supposed to take so that they can then analyze this data and take better decisions?
The level of problem scales with the level of stores that you have.
Okay.
And the locations in which your stores are present in. So if you're a city level brand, understanding core preferences of what embroidery type works, colors, sizes, gets you a good crack at the city. The moment you go regional, then you have to understand a higher number of cultures and their preferences. And the moment you go national, that's when you truly need a proper artificial intelligence level system to be able to do such heavy lifting. So the scale at which you need to think changes with your scale as well. But this industry is highly complicated. And today what is happening is there is a large retailer like us, and majority of the industry is unorganized, with most of the stores actually being single stores.
Okay.
So these single stores have this set consumer type that goes to them, and they're able to understand just that one particular market. Even those stores are not using data or their lifelong experience to curate the collection to the level they potentially can.
Got it. Got it. So the first thing they should do is collect data, have as many data points as possible, and use those data points to make better decisions.
And I would say this is not the case for Indian wear at all. This is the case for any retail company in India or in the world.
Got it. So that they can optimize for their inventory.
Absolutely, because...
But tell me something, let's say there's a retail store. Let's take Puja Stores, which is right alongside my house. And the Puja store guy sells a lot of products. He also has everything feeded in the system. What should he do with this data? Should he go to a particular website or tool? Are there tools by which you can analyze this data for something as small as a retail store?
most of the things that we use have been built in-house. But I think it requires just one person who is high on common sense and high on passion.
Okay.
If they have this one guy, then they can definitely start to understand. So there's something which we call sell-through.
Sell-through.
Which is velocity of sales. So this is a technical term and most retailers use it to see how fast a certain product is moving. And that kind of helps you understand how much of that inventory you need. And then you go to a different level to see which months is the velocity high or slow to improve your planning systems. So depending on what sort of a retail environment you're operating in, your complexity can increase. But if you're able to get a basic sense of that data about what's working with the guests and how fast is it working, then you can start improving your working capital cycle and lower your debt stock.
Is there a SaaS product that we can use for a small store today?
Not that I'm aware of. There are definitely very large enterprises that I've come across, but I'm sure there would be someone doing something at a basic level.
Got it. Makes sense. Bro, tell me something. I have seen a lot of family Indian businesses that do insanely well for 2 decades. Like they go from 0 to 1 crore, from 1 to 10, sometimes even 20 and 30 crores. But beyond 30 crores, they find a difficulty in scaling. Why is that?
I think the biggest challenge that a lot of businesses face is they don't create ERP systems, for example. They don't bring in partners to help establish ERP systems, for example. And I've seen this a lot, in some of the people I interact with, where uh, due to low levels of corporate governance, they even find it challenging to install ERP systems. And if people just focus on running their business instead of spending a lot of time in, let's say, saving tax, and they invest in technology products, that is what will help them establish larger vision and larger thought processes. So I think a lot of focus on what will happen this year or next year versus actually investing in process tech and automation for the journey that you're going to get into the next decade or so.
Do you think the saving taxes is a big problem in the Indian business ecosystem?
It's definitely changing a lot. We've really, overall as a country, I think what I'm seeing is a lot of evolution happening. Um, and my point here that we try to make to any business owner we meet is any time you spend on things like these is time wasted that could have been invested in creating a larger business. So my challenge really here is a lot of people are adding stress to their minds, are taking away 20, 30, 40% of their time that could have been invested in the business to think about smaller topics like these, which have no relevance 10 years down the line when you've created a big business. Who's going to look back to see this is what, I was trying to do?
You save 10% tax.
Yeah, wow. Like what an achievement versus your business having scaled, let's say 20, 30x by then.
Very interesting. Do you think family businesses in India spend a lot of time saving taxes and that in a way stunts their growth? Because I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say I buy something and that something is bought with cash. The moment it is bought with cash, there is no record. Now, from the perspective of the business, it means that they've saved on tax. But after listening to your story about data, what I understand is that that is one less data input.
Correct.
Now, if I stretch that and scale this across 10 years and 100,000 units sold, those are 100,000 data points that I have missed, which will prevent me from making better decisions. Eventually, I will not be able to grow my business. For example, when you mentioned that L and XL are selling insanely well, whereas the MBOs were ordering S, M, and L all in equal quantities, that insight was fundamentally coming from data. And that data fundamentally came from the fact that you guys were documenting everything. And that also came from the fact that you guys were paying taxes. So, if I were to connect the dots, if you don't pay taxes, you will save up on that 10-20%, but you will also end up stunting the growth of your business, because in this world where data is oil, saving taxes should be the least of your concerns.
Correct.
And collecting data should be the biggest of your concerns.
I completely agree with you. But there's a larger point here as well, that if you're spending so much time thinking about these petty things, and that is going to take away from the time you invest in understanding data, in understanding how to create systems and processes. That's also a huge miss that entrepreneurs are, kind of doing.
True.
It's really changing. It's really changing. I'll give you one more example. So in 2011 or 12, and remember, we are a Calcutta-based, fully private company at this point. We brought in Big Four auditors, both for external and internal audit.
Okay.
And this is something that was unheard of in the industry. Typically, only public companies or soon-to-be public companies were going for Big Four auditors. And the whole thought process here is, if we was going to smooth out every single layer of our operations, if we had a SOP in place for everything, if everything was at a level of corporate governance never seen before, the senior management would not worry about petty things and would always focus on growing the business. So having cleared out so much time from the bottom of the pyramid decision making, that allowed us to think about the larger decisions we would like to make for the business and how to scale it to the next level.
Got it. So do you think even a 10 crore company should be very, very strict about governance and they should get in these companies like Big Fours to audit them?
Big Four might be pushing it at that number, if they can afford it, maybe. But definitely getting an auditor who is not working for you per se, but working like an external partner in the truest sense is very helpful.
Let's take profits now, because revenue, that'll be extremely misleading because margins will differ. At what profit point do you think a company should get an external auditor like KPMG?
It's hard for me to define, but I would say a number close to 30-40 crores
In profits.
in profits definitely makes it very achievable to bring in a big four auditor, and at the same time, create systems and processes that you require for the next level of growth.
What do you mean by systems and processes for the next level of growth? As in, I want to understand from your context, when the big four came in to your life, how did they change your life in terms of systems and processes?
There are a lot of SOPs that you don't fundamentally think about. By SOPs, by the way, I mean standard operating procedure in a business. So what that helps in doing is you rethink about everything you've developed over a period of time. And when it was, let's say, someone from the senior management taking decisions on those items, you could be a lot more confident. But today it might be a management -3 guy taking those decisions.
Can you give me an example?
Let's take, for example, procurement of fabric. So earlier, our head of design would say that this is a fabric we need to procure. Today, there's a team of 30 people who can decide the kind of fabrics we need to procure. So you need to define exactly how that decision-making process will flow, how the approvals will come through, how will the payment be automated, how is the GST captured. So all of that mechanism, because we work with more than 450 supply chain partners, we even have an internal team that helps our partners create their GST codes, educates them on how to pay taxes, helps them become part of the formal economy. There are a lot of aspects to think about scaling a business using a mixture of technology, processes, and people.
Technology, processes, and people.
Correct.
Okay.
So like we were mentioning, you have tech in place to automate the processes that the business has deemed as useful for a particular task that is taking place. And because you're scaling the number of people, as in when the company scales, even they understand their role a lot better. And they understand exactly what they're responsible for and the kind of part they take in that process.
Got it. So moral of the story is pay taxes without bothering about saving taxes, because if you save taxes, you will lose business. Number 2, corporate governance is very, very important. The moment you hit 30 or 40 crores in profits, you should get one of the big fours. And even while you are at a smaller level, you should get in auditors so that you can prepare to become a 30, 40 crore company. Vedant, now I want to get into marketing, because this is a very exciting part, especially because you guys got in Virat and Anushka, and then they got married, and then those ads are still playing on Instagram. Okay, it was iconic. And it was such a wholesome ad. Eventually, because it turned into reality, it became even more wholesome, even more meaningful, even more impactful. Walk me through that journey.
I mean, at the core of our marketing, we've always done off-the-book things. I'll give you an example at the very start of a marketing journey. If a brand our size back then would buy a quarter pager on a Times of India, we went in and bought a full page.
Okay.
So we always like to do things in a bigger fashion, in an impact manner. If people were making movies with, let's say, a production cost of X, we said we will make a movie with production cost of 4X, which was never seen in this industry before. And that quality still stands in any creative or ad that comes out of our brand.
Grand.
It has to be aspirational beyond someone's thinking. It has to be something that truly inspires like a boy or a girl looking at it to want to get married in that manner. And that's what we've always tried to do, create that big aspiration. Virat, when we wanted to get him on board, was a no-brainer. The way he was playing, the fact that he was very good looking, all of those things added up. And we signed Virat. And we saw this opportunity It was a known fact that he was dating Anushka at that time. And we tried our best to signing her. Took us a lot of time and effort. But we saw the real life value that this couple could bring, because we've always done marketing based on real life insights.
What do you
We've-
mean by that?
What I mean by that is, I am not a big, fan of market research companies. I don't think they help you understand consumer insights at a deep level. All the consumer insights that our ads have been built on come from personal life experiences of my father. A lot of them come from people in our marketing team. And it's all based on real feelings that someone faces. So we made a film with Virat, for example. This was about Shadi ka kharcha aadha aadha. Now, India has grown from a certain, mindset. And the whole thought process and philosophy is that we create big aspirational ads that are truly based on a strong insight. When you look at the Virat Anushka campaign, that stemmed from the fact that there was something truly special. If you look at the film, you can see that chemistry in the
Yeah.
couple. This can't be replicated by models.
True.
Right? And then the script added fuel to a twist to Nai Rishte Nai Waade, where we went from talking about the 7 feras you take to the 7 new vows you should take as a couple. And this actually didn't exist before.
Correct.
And this has now become a wedding trend in India. A lot of the weddings you see, you will see the groom and the bride making vows.
Correct.
So with a lot of our campaigns, we've also started wedding trends.
Teju's, by the way, about to send me a big checklist of promises that I'm supposed to fulfill.
Amazing.
So, yeah, you guys have truly impacted our lives, because I've got promises to fulfill because of you now. But it's very sweet, man. It's very sweet, because when I looked at the ad, it was so fulfilling. And 2016, bhai, this is 2024, 8 years later also, the ad is so memorable. And you guys also played it in the theaters, right?
Yes.
Did you guys pioneer the theater advertising? Because I only remember your ads very distinctly played in theaters, and the ad by itself was so grand that it evoked that emotion which otherwise cannot be done on TV. So, what was the insight with theaters?
Well, theaters is a very exciting space for us. And I'll explain this in multiple ways. One is the big screen gives you that big aspirational value.
Correct.
The second is, of course, there's a captive audience wanting to see the ads also in a grander way, right? But most importantly, majority of India is still set through arranged marriages. Now, where does an arranged couple go for dates in India? If you think about that, they go for restaurant meals. But after their roka has happened, or to say their rishta is confirmed, the next layer of places they go to, typically multiplex is the first. And this is when they've just started their thinking about buying their wedding sherwani or their wedding lehenga. So it's about catching the guest at the right time and ensuring we are able to inspire them to the truest level possible. And this insight again also comes from personal experiences. No media or marketing company would come out and say things in this methodology.
Very interesting. You said that you're not a big fan of market research, and yet you gave me such fascinating insights about Veshti and the color of dress that a South Indian person would wear at the wedding. My question is, how do you manage to collect so much data, if not for market research companies?
This is all based on multiple level of aspects. So one is we utilize our own first party data at a very extreme level, especially product data.
What do you mean by first party data?
By all the data we are collecting from our own stores, basis the products that are being sold, in which part of the country, in which time of the year. So all of that gives us a lot of data. But more importantly, what we can also do is we utilize a lot of Google Trends data.
Google Trends data.
Correct.
Okay, walk me through one of them.
Because in reality, you can see what people in which part of the country are searching for online.
Got it.
That gives you an insight into how different consumers are now thinking about, a particular purchase that they want to make.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. Let's say if people were searching for shirts in 2016, today, given the athleisure wave that India has seen in the last 8 years, a lot of percentage of shirt searches have actually moved to athleisure. So you can see that India's thinking is changing, and this is at a factual data level. So that is very relevant because this is like pure quantitative secondary research you can do on Google.
But when it comes to these deep insights like Veshti, the cloth, and stuff like that, let's assume that you do not have any stores in Tamil Nadu. What would be your approach towards the market?
No, so when I say market research is something I don't believe in, what I'm trying to say here is I don't believe in paid market research by third-party companies.
Got it.
But the individuals in the company have to be very high on collecting these insights. So in case you don't have a store, you still need to visit Chennai. You need to visit every single store in a T Nagar, in a Pondi Bazaar, in a Anna Nagar, understand what is happening in the core markets of Chennai.
Okay.
Then you should also look at the tier 2, tier 3 cities. You need to be visiting a little bit of Madurai, Salem, understand what's happening in these cities. And finally, on top of that, if possible, let's say if you're in the wedding industry, try to attend 2 or 3 weddings that are happening in Tamil Nadu, and you will get to the insights in a matter of minutes.
Okay, so let's say you go to a store in Salem. What would you ask the store owner to collect insights?
So if this is a store that is already existing and I'm visiting, I won't ask them anything per se. Go with the flow, and most importantly, try to observe some guests. One challenge that I have faced is I don't speak Tamil. So it's very difficult. So I have to rely on other people's knowledge when they visit and they do the market research. I try to stand with them and see what they're kind of talking about, and then ask them to translate it for me. But the idea is just to try pick up the sensibilities, the feelings of that particular market.
Vedant, I'll give you an example, and I want to understand a large company's approach towards a market. The best example for the same is Pulse Candy. So, when I was studying the case study of Pulse Candy, what I realized is that the hard-boiled candy segment is a very counterintuitive segment to be in. On the outside, it looks like it's pretty easy. All you need is sugar, flavor, packaging, that's it. So, there are a lot of copycats who come into the market because barrier to entry is very low. Now, the moment you say barrier to entry is very low, most people think it's easy to go to the market. But because the barrier to entry is so low and the copycats enter the market, they often undercut you, because of which you can't increase prices. And number two, in India, people care more about the flavor than the brand. So if you ask for a scent of fresh and somebody gives you a scent of fruit of the same flavor, you will not get angry. But if somebody gives you strawberry when you ask for mint, that will bother you, right? So the DS group took such a beautiful approach to go to the market that they first studied what exactly does India prefer, and they made a chart. They understood that in South India, ABC flavors work. In North India, XYZ flavors work. In West, this works. In East, this works. And then they found 2 options. The first option was to launch a particular flavor for every part of India, which is what you guys do, basically. Or the other was to launch a product that all of India can fall in love with. And when they did their research, they found that the one flavor that will do insanely well all across India is the flavor of mango. But then there was already mango bite. So they said, can we do something with kacha mango? And that is how they zeroed down on the flavor of raw mango. And the reason why they decided on raw mango was because they saw that all across India, there were dishes being made out of raw mango. So in South India, you have manga pachadi, you have manga sadam. In the north, you've got aam panna, and so on and so forth. So on the basis of that insight, they zeroed down on the flavor. After that, they studied the consumption cycle. So when you have a candy, the sugar first hits you. But after that, the experience dies down. So the DS group thought, can we make a candy which can engage the customer all throughout the consumption of the candy? And that is how they decided to put in the masala. So that first there is anticipation and slowly the masala starts to come out. You get a different flavor and eventually you bite the candy and then you get a different experience. So do you realize even though DS Group was such a large company, they got on ground and they found those little nuances based on which they launched a product, which was very easy to make. But because the insight was so strong and so accurate, within the first 8 months itself, Pulse was able to generate 100 crore rupees in revenue with zero marketing, and today they stand at 1,000 crores.
I'll add an insight here.
Okay.
So everything you spoke about is brilliant, and they executed it really well. And all of this is a result of understanding your product and consumers really well. But this is not an insight you get by visiting the Panwaris across the country.
Correct.
The insight you get by visiting the Panwaris across the country is that when you pay 10 rupees, majority of the items are 7 rupees, 8 rupees.
Correct.
How do you get them to give a pulse instead of the 2 coins?
Right.
That is what you do the market visits for.
Got it.
And this is, to be honest, I'm not sure if this is a fact, but majority of Pulse's business might be a result of Panwaris giving Pulse instead of change.
It was because DS Group gave them very healthy margins. So what I'm trying to understand through the DS Group analogy is the DS Group had two levels of research. One is the micro research by visiting the Panwadis, and one is the macro research where they could study data and understand what kind of product will do well in which parts of India. So when it comes to Manyavar, because you have such a complex catalog and such a complex country of different culture and different languages to cater to, can you walk me through the micro and macro levels of research when it comes to your go-to market strategy for a particular state, any state that you would like?
So, the way you described it, for us, the macro strategy involves the categories that we will be curating. What I mean by that is when we enter a Hyderabad, in a Hyderabad, we have Panchakachams as a major category in our stores.
Panchakacham.
Correct. This is what people in Andhra and Telangana wear in the morning when they're getting married.
Got it.
And this is very close to their religion and culture. And at the same time, we also have all the North Indian items that we create, such as Indo-Westerns and Sherwanis. What that allows us to do is that as the culture of Telangana has evolved, when they marry in their own cultural style in the morning, but in the evening when they celebrate reception in a more sort of Bollywood style reception, that's when they buy a Sherwani.
Correct.
So that is how the macro strategy is sort of defined, that what are the categories that are needed. When we do it in West Bengal, we have a whole category of dhotis for the wedding day. And that is how we, sort of understand that whole aspect.
Got it. So culture, ritual, itinerary.
Absolutely.
Because on the basis of the itinerary,
Correct.
the dress is decided. On the basis of the culture, the larger aspect of the dressing is
Correct.
decided. And on the basis of the ritual, the specific clothing are
Absolutely.
decided.
Absolutely.
Great.
And
And
then-
then how do you get into the specifics of, like you said, the type of cloth that you're supposed to use? Because if you use the same cloth as that of your competitor, then there is no delta. But then you mentioned the nuances of which cloth you should use and how do you collect data on the basis of what the customer buys, and then how you evolve your product catalog. How does that work?
Now, this, like I've been mentioning, is at this point in our life cycle, almost completely driven by algorithms and AI.
Wow.
For us to understand what kind of fabric is being preferred in which part of the country, how are the trends changing in a real time, and then we automatically pick up that data, pass it to our design team, and change our methodology of using those particular compositions and fabrics as well.
Got it.
On top of that, we also innovate a lot. So there is one thing which is data driven, but at the same time, we send 20-25% of the inventory basis what we think is new and something which has not been data tested.
Got it. This is for iteration.
This is for iteration, correct. This is to improve the learning of the system.
Got it. Got it. So you introduce new things on the basis of what you think will work. Plus, you have 70% of your inventory on the basis of the data. So what happens is the data that you've collected for the past can help you make better decisions. And when you do trials and errors, it gives you new data sets to get more data for the future. Does that summarize what you just said? Perfect. Now let's come back to marketing and advertising. After Virat and Anushka endorsed your brand, did you see a huge uptick in sales?
So what we've realized is marketing and advertising, if a campaign is really successful, you see a high uptick on your brand equity.
Okay.
it per se doesn't lead into very high sales.
Okay.
What that does though is it sets you up for a decade of growth.
Decade of growth.
A decade of growth. So not exactly a decade of growth, but a longer term period of growth. So like we are talking about the Virat Anushka campaign today, but this is a campaign which was done about 8 years ago, right? If this is still playing in the minds of a young consumer who back then was not of the marriageable age, but today is, and still getting them to the store, that campaign is still giving us ROI.
That's me, bro.
Amazing. So that is what I'm trying to say, that a great campaign gives you ROI for a lot of years that are going to come. You may or may not see an uptick right there and then, but what you do see an uptick in is earned PR. You see an uptick in brand equity. You see an uptick in Google searches. Are more people searching for your brand?
Got it. Got it. So when it comes to Virat and Anushka, it did give you brand equity, but did it also result into sales spike?
Definitely did result into sales spike to some level of extent, but nothing out of the ordinary for
Got
our
it.
company. But I think that is also because brand marketing is not something you do for the current year. Brand marketing is something you're doing to create a larger aspirational image for the long term.
Got it. Vedant, just like you mentioned for your products, you know what kind of products will sell. Somehow, I think you're also able to predict which celebrity will get married. Because you got in Anushka and Virat, they got married. You got in Kiara and she got married. You got in Alia and she got married. All of this happened within a span of 12 months after they endorsed your brand. So, do you also collect data for this?
The way we look at marketing is getting a celebrity and getting them to say something doesn't work. It has to be a mix of real life insights, a little bit of the celebrity's personal life to ensure that when they are speaking on behalf of the brand, it looks authentic.
Authenticity.
Authenticity is what works. And a lot of people have been saying this for creator economy, but that has been our philosophy from the very first day of marketing.
True.
Our campaigns have to be authentic. They have to speak about real life insights. That is why when we try to bring in a celebrity, we try to find people who are the most poised to get married. So when the audience looks at them getting married, they are able to feel that sense of emotion. We want that little bit of goosebumps in our creatives.
Very interesting.
So
Also, the chemistry shows up, right?
absolutely, the chemistry shows up. You're able to get a lot more earned PR when they actually get married.
Yeah.
So there's that side of things as well.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Vedant, I had this one question. The menswear industry is, if I'm not wrong, much smaller as compared to the women's wear industry.
Right.
The ticket size when it comes to ethnic wear among women is far higher. The quantity of clothes that they buy is also much higher, because you and I, we might wear the same kurta for all of our friends' engagement, but that's not the case with girls. They usually tend to buy different pieces of attires for different functions that they go to. But then Manyavar largely has been built around menswear. Was that because menswear was a blue ocean?
So the real answer to this is because my grandfather ran a men's retail store.
Okay.
My dad grew up learning in that store.
Okay.
He understood men's. So it was just because he understood men's, it seemed like the natural thing to progress into. And it, like I mentioned, it was partly destiny and partly understanding of a gap in the market. Is how we, came to launch Manyavar. But in 2016, by the time we had automated majority of our processes, Dad had freed up a lot of his bandwidth. We envisioned and we, kind of launched Mohe in 2016, which is our women's mid-premium brand. So the whole, which is our women's premium brand.
Women's premium brand.
Yeah.
Got it. You also have 2 more brands under your catalog, right?
Correct. So we also have Twamev, which is our luxury offering.
Okay.
The whole idea with Twamev is there are so many women and men out there who aspire to wear extremely high-end clothing, but majority of it is unaffordable because there is so much inefficiency in the overall supply chain. So we've tried to create a brand with Twamev that is able to bring the same level, if not better, product at a much more affordable price point.
Basically, Manish Malhotra, but at scale.
I won't use that particular designer name, but like you could say, majority of the designers, what they try to create, but at scale.
Okay. Makes sense. And what's the market insight behind that? Is that a growing category?
Absolutely.
Okay, first let's break down the ethnic wear market of India. Okay, where does it start from?
So overall, the market is about 1.6 lakh odd crores.
Okay, great. And what is the first price slab that we can start with?
So I mean, in the Indian wear market, price slabs would start very early on. You could even say a 600 rupee kurta or a sari is where the price points actually start at.
Got it. Where
For
do
the
your
industry.
price points start?
So we actually have a new brand launch of Divas on the 23rd of September.
Okay.
And with Divas, we are launching our festive offering. So with Divas, our starting price points for kurtas would be about 799.
799. Got it. And then when it comes to Manyavar,
At Manyavar, we do kurtas at starting price points of 1499. But
1499.
majority of our offering would be 2999.
2999.
Correct.
Got it. And then what's the next price slab?
And then with Twamev kurtas, we go to a starting price point of about 5999.
5999.
Correct.
Got it. So we have, let's define categories of attires now. We have kurtas, sherwanis. Do we have something in between?
Yeah, so we also have Nehru jackets and Nehru jacket sets.
Nehru jacket sets. Anything else?
There is also a shorter version of a sherwani which is known as Indo-Westerns.
Indo-Westerns.
Correct. And then there's Band Galas, Jodhpuri. So there's a lot of additional categories in Indian wear space. And there's also regional categories. So dhotis, panchakachams, vestis. So we operate in all of them, but you've listed down the majority of the categories.
Got it. And then when it comes to Twamev, what's the upper limit of the price point?
So the highest price sherwani, highest price lehenga that we would be offering at this time would be about 2 lakh rupees.
2 lakh rupees.
Correct.
And will they sell from the same store as that of Manyavar, or do they have different stores?
So Twamev has 5 exclusive brand outlets where it's only Twamev.
Okay.
And Twamev is also sold out of some of our top Manyavar-Mohe stores.
Top Manyavar-Mohe stores.
Correct.
Okay. So do you plan to give this out in the FOFO model, or is this company owned, company operated?
So everything is company owned and franchisee operated like a model is.
Sorry, company owned and franchise operated.
Correct. So everything is in that model.
Got it.
Even Twamev is in that model.
Perfect. Understood. So there is Divas, Manyavar, Mohe, and Twamev.
Correct. And we also have a regional brand called Mebaz,
Mebaz.
which is based in AP and Telangana primarily.
Okay.
This is a brand we had acquired in 2017 and we saw huge potential in that market.
Got it. Makes sense. Vedant, I read something very fascinating about your financials. I read that you have 90 to 95% free cash flow. So for our audience, could you please help me understand what is free cash flow and how do you have 90 to 95% of free cash flow?
So free cash flow is basically all the cash flowing into the company divided by PAT. So that's the free cash flow percentage I think you're looking at. And
Can you help me understand this with an example?
sure. So I mean, there are two sides of finances, right? There is the profit that you book, and there's the actual cash that has come into the company at the end of the year. Profits wouldn't account for, let's say, capex expenditure to the same extent as cash flows would, because in the profit side of things, it will only be the depreciation which you remove. So that's the major difference. And the reason we're able to achieve a very high cash flow is because, number one, we're able to move inventory very quickly because of the kind of data we function on and the kind of planning and replenishment systems we have. We are able to work on a very lean working capital model that allows us to have a lot of cash flow in the company.
Got it.
And at the same time, by having franchisee partners, it allows us to scale stores without actually putting in capex into our business.
Got it. Cool. Within the last part that I want to touch upon is your personal life. How does it feel to be the son of a billionaire, bro?
It's very humbling in a way, I would say. Uh, but the idea is being yourself. I think it had, like, when I was born, we were, I would say, middle class or slightly beyond middle class at that point of time. But our habits have not changed. Me and my dad still go for kachori sabzi in the morning to Bara Bazaar in Calcutta. Right? Our favorite meal is still going to a dhaba. So I think if business scale has changed, but life has remained very similar. And I think before this podcast, the good thing is we've always been very introverted. We're not very social that way. And that kind of, keeps you humble. I think life for me, while on weekdays is very work focused, and weekends is a mix of meeting family, meeting friends. And of course, as an entrepreneur, even weekends is not completely switching off from work because it's always running at the back of your mind. And there are some phone calls, there are some meetings that you still have to attend to. But all in all, if you love doing what you do, it's a great life to be living.
But you are 25 years old. And when it comes to most families, if the son ends up making more than a crore or so, that person becomes the star of the family because they've earned more than most family members, if not all of them. But when it comes to you, you are functioning under the canopy of your father.
Correct.
And that is a very big benchmark to beat. My question is, do you feel this imposter syndrome? Ki maybe you're just getting everything very easily because you're 25 years old and you're running a company with a market cap of 30,000 crores.
I would say I definitely feel that sometimes. And it's very natural to feel that. Because while I try to do the best I can, matching his level is almost impossible for me. But what I can try do is learn as much as I can from him and try to implement his way of thinking into as many things as I can. And I've got the physical energy of a 25-year-old currently, which I have to utilize as much as I can and, try to execute newer things that the company is trying to achieve in a very quick way possible. But I think what was very advantageous to me, which I was, kind of talking about earlier, is I walked into the business after university with already a lot of knowledge because I was somewhere involved in the business before I went out for uni. And at the same time, even while at university, me and my dad spoke about business almost every day for 2 hours.
What did you study?
I actually studied data science.
Data science.
Yeah.
That is the reason why you're so particular about data.
Not at all, actually. I studied data science because our company was so much around data and I was fascinated by it.
Interesting.
So it's the other way around, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a great course. Came back thinking I could implement way more. But when I realized the complexity at which things were already implemented from an algorithm perspective, it was very challenging to actually add value to those algos.
Interesting. Do you feel ever pressurized कि पापा ने इतना सब कुछ करा है कि इसको बीट करना बहुत मुश्किल है in a lifetime? Do you ever feel that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very natural thing for me to feel. But at the same time, I also think he's given me a base to start with. I think the way with which India is growing and the way with which our pride is exploding at the current moment, this industry is just starting. So he's put me in a spot with a company with the best infrastructure possible from all aspects, from aspects of the best backend possible, with the best retail locations in the country, and with now the industry and the country supporting this whole momentum. I think it's going to be a fantastic ride.
Yeah, you're practically at the bottom of a hockey stick growth.
Correct. And also, my dad is just 47 years old, by the way. So he's a very young father. So he's definitely still there to motivate all of us.
So he
and
had
to-
you when he was 22.
Correct.
Man, that's crazy, bro. So at 22, he started Manyavar.
Yes.
That's brilliant. How is he like a boss? As a father, very supportive, very kind. But as a
Yeah.
boss, how is he?
Super, super chill as a father.
Okay.
As a boss, he is. I'll give you one example, right? I had officially joined the company in June 2021, and we were starting our IPO roadshows. So, IPO roadshows is basically when you meet 100 to 200 investors and you pitch your company and they ask you question and answers. And these questions are like deep level questions. We started our roadshow sometime in October, November of 2021.
Can you tell me what is this roadshow?
Yeah, so roadshow is the process in a initial public offering where you meet 100 to 200 investors who then bases your meeting and the analysis of your company help you build an anchor book.
What is that?
This anchor book is the initial set of investors who are already confirmed to be part of being part of the initial public offering as investors,
Got it.
and their allocation is chosen by the company.
Oh,
And it's signed off even before the 3 days of the IPO starts.
got it.
And your valuation benchmarks are also a result of the number analysis and this roadshow meeting.
Oh,
So potentially these 100 to 200 roadshows define, from a number perspective, the work he's put in for the last 22, 23 years. And he's called me a day before the roadshow starts saying that, Vedant, the roadshow start tomorrow and you're going to be the one leading the meetings, and I am not going to be part of these meetings.
why?
Two reasons, I think. The first one is he knew that this is going to be a repetitive work because this roadshow is eventually going to turn into investor relations, and he hates being part of something which is repetitive.
Acha.
That has to be automated in the form of either tech, system, people, or processes, right? There's one side of it, but I think the largest piece which he saw there is if I was to do the road shows, I would understand the company at a very deep level. So I had the knowledge of the retail side of things, but this would give me knowledge of every vertical in the company. And I started interacting with all the investors from the next day onwards.
How old were you?
I was 22.
22.
Yeah. So even all the investors were shocked that a 22-year guy was pitching a $3 billion company to them. $3-4 billion company.
They must have thought intern aaya hai.
And my name kind of gives it away. But otherwise, probably that's what they would have thought.
Very interesting, man. What are the questions that they asked you?
I mean, there are questions around how do you look at long-term growth, which are more qualitative in nature and how we look at the business. But then there's also certain quantitative depth. What is your inventory turns, working capital? How are you going to improve these numbers in the future?
They asked you all of this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I mean, these questions are... So, I mean, if anyone wants to know what these questions are like, you should just pick up our earnings call or any other retail company's earnings call. And if you read 3-4 of those earnings call, a mixture of those is what people typically ask you.
Got it. Very interesting. And how did you prepare within a day?
I already knew majority of the data.
Okay.
I didn't prepare.
You didn't prepare?
I didn't prepare.
Wow.
That's the honest answer. The preparation lied in the 2-3 hour conversation for almost all my life with my dad.
Yeah, because if you had been deeply involved with the business,
Yeah.
your dinner table conversations would just become formal when it comes to investor relations, right? Because those are the same questions that your father might throw at you.
Correct.
Or the same questions that you would be discussing about. That also presents a very important point that the most important and perhaps the most pivotal moments of your life are those moments that you've always been preparing for. And when your company went IPO, how did it feel? Because that's when The billion was added to your name, right? How did it feel, man?
When we actually IPO'd, it's a very interesting story. So when we had started with our anchor book, that time the demand was very high.
Okay.
So the IPO season was in its peak. So the demand we were getting, the predictions were of a 60x, a 70x sort of a subscription. And then as the IPO date came closer, the market started going down. There were some geopolitical things happening across the globe. The US markets were impacted. The Indian markets were getting impacted. And our investment bankers got a little jittery for the first time seeing the condition of the markets. We stood strong with the business model we had created. We decided to still go through with the IPO, and it didn't feel the success was as grand as it potentially should have been. And because especially when this is like your first big project in life, it holds a lot of meaning to it. But when the bell rang and everything opened in green, it was something I had never felt before. Another crazy, fact here: my dad didn't come for the bell ringing.
Why?
So he wanted to be with his mom, and he wanted to just be with her. He wanted to be with my dadi and to enjoy this time and success with her.
Wow.
He said, Vedant, you go and do all this formal stuff. I'm going to actually take in the blessings of my mother during a time like this. So that's what I'm trying to say. He's a very different person, but the most logical you'll ever meet.
Very interesting. Vedant, last question. What are the 3 most important attributes of your father that you would like to pass on to the next generation?
His time management is at a different level. So with time management, if he ever tells me that, let's say we're going to go for work together at 9 a.m., if I'm there at 9 a.m. 30 seconds, he's already left.
He's already left.
Correct.
Okay.
9 a.m. means 9 a.m. Because he's already seen on Google Maps that time to work today is showing as 30 minutes. He wants to reach at 9:30, so he's left at 9 a.m. And everything he does in a hyper-focused manner. So that whole aspect of his life is just intense.
Hyper-focused.
Correct. The second big attribute is his data and memory skills. Every night for 2-3 hours, he consumes what happened across the country, across the globe now, in the form of what products were moving at which velocity in which parts of the country, to the extent where next morning I can ask him how many red saris sold in Patna, and he might have the answer to that.
Wow. Obsession with data.
Obsession with data. And the third is the never giving up spirit. 3% deadstock with no discounts is the best in the world. But no, we have to take this to 1%. How do we do this?
1%.
That philosophy in life of not giving up or not stopping, and always trying to motivate everyone around him. I think that whole aspect of him is amazing.
And what are the 3 aspects that you would not like to pass on to the next generation?
From him,
Yeah.
nothing.
Nothing.
I think it's like, genuinely speaking, he's the most logical person. So if there is something to say, I will go and I'll talk to him. And within an hour, within 2 hours, it would have corrected or he would have proved me wrong. Either way.
As in open to argument.
Very open, like extremely open.
Very
And
interesting.
actually, I wouldn't call it argument, discussions.
Discussions.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Vedant, I have had such a blast having this conversation with you. I have made 4 or 5 pages of notes. I'll just try to summarize as much as possible because this is all written in very bad handwriting. Because I was so deeply involved in this conversation that I'm able to visualize everything that you just said, starting from the theaters to Virat and Anushka and Ravi Uncle. And I'm going to try and make sure that I at least meet him once if given a chance. So here's what I could understand. Ravi Uncle started with 10,000 rupees in capital because of a small tussle that he had with his father. And the first thing he did is optimize his working capital in such a way that he could split it into 70-30, sell 30% of the stock at a loss so that he could pay the workers, sold 70% of the stock at a profit so that he could sustain the business. But the reason why he grew so fast was because he was obsessed with data. He had interacted with 100,000 customers in the 9 years of him sitting at the shop, because of which he was able to understand taste, preference, sales, and more importantly, he was able to understand what exactly does the customer desire, both in terms of tangible value, which is the product, and the perceived value, which is the treatment of the customer. Like you said before, never judge a customer on the basis of the attire. Always believe that you can make the sale happen. And most importantly, never treat your customer as a customer. Treat customers as guests. Because of him doing that, he was able to succeed in his initial 3 to 4 years. Eventually, you guys gave your units to a multi-brand outlet. When you gave your units to the multi-brand outlet, you started collecting data. And one good opportunity was
Shop
the
and shop. So this MBO would be a shop and shop.
shop and shop. So the moment you, and one big data opportunity actually came up when you started to, when you set up your shop and shop in Central. And when you collected a lot of data, you understood that there was a big gap between what the MBOs were ordering and what they were supposed to order on the basis of the data that you collected from your shop. And that is what started your data analytics journey, because Uncle was and still is obsessed with efficiency. On the basis of that, you laid the foundations to build a company that works on the basis of data and not micro taste, because taste is subjective, but data is not. You used this model to scale the company across the country through company owned franchise operated model. Is that correct?
It's somewhere in the middle of company owned, franchisee operated, and franchisee owned, franchisee operated.
Company owned franchise operated model. But because you're able to collect data from all these stores, you are able to maintain an inventory level of just 3%, which gives you very high return on capital invested, which makes the company more efficient. But the foundation for this efficient company functioning also came from the fact that you were obsessed with corporate governance. Even while you were a very small company, you made sure that you're compliant with all the rules and regulations and taxes. And while most people would spend their money and time into saving taxes, you invested your money back into the business and you invested your time into growing the business. And fundamentally, when you did everything right, you were able to collect a lot of data, which again gave you a lot of intelligence, which helped you place better products at the store level. When it comes to your store level design also, what I understood is that you don't place the same products in all the stores. Because of the data that you collect, every store is able to get customized stock. And because of that, again, the inventory levels go down. The return on capital increases by a large extent. As a result, each customer, knowingly or unknowingly, is able to pick the best material that they want. Another thing that I understood is the impact of store experience is actually brought in by the sales staff. And the moment you treat them as an important part of the team, and you give them enough training to help them understand the nuances of culture, they're able to recommend better products to the customer. And because you also teach them how to treat the customer, they're able to form a better relationship with the customer, just like I have a great relationship with my Manayvar ke kaka, because of which the customer keeps coming back. And while the sale happens, you collect 30 to 40 data points per unit sold, which helps you drive better decisions again. Then the other thing that I understood is, while going IPO, it is absolutely important that you understand your company extremely well, understand the numbers extremely well, but this is not something that you can prepare overnight. This is something that can only be done when you have A, meaningful dinner table conversations, B, you spend a lot of time on ground and you fundamentally understand your company better. If all of these things are done right, you can go on to build a very successful company. Now, the things that people are doing wrong is that A, they're trying to save taxes, B, they're not collecting enough data, and C, the business owner may not be spending as much time at the store as much as he or she is supposed to. If they spend enough time, they'll be able to understand the nuances, and that will potentially help them build a very large company. And the conversation that we had both in front of the camera and outside the camera, what I've also understood is that you have been very well groomed in terms of how to handle the business, because from a very young age, even you have been at your store just like your father, and you're also collecting data, which helps you make better decisions. Another nuance that I also understood about your data collection is that just like the DS group understood macro India and micro India both, you also have, let's say, 30% of the stock going in on the basis of the data that you've collected, and 30% of the stock is new stock so that it can help you drive decisions for the future. This way, you know that you are optimizing both for efficiency as well as innovation.
Correct. Also, there's one thing which we didn't talk about is, unlike most brands, we do new collection every week.
New collection every week.
You can maybe just add it in your summary, I think.
Got it. And you also have new collections coming in every week.
Yeah.
Does that summarize our conversation, bro?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Thank you
Amazing.
so much, Vedant. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending so much time with me. It didn't feel like we're meeting for the first time.
Yeah, I didn't.
And this is amazing. I would love to do this more often. And you've given me so much inspiration. So the first thing that I'm going to do after going back is to make sure that we also have a governance policy in the company, because I've never been guided by somebody who's done business for a decade. And today what you just brought to the table is 2 decades worth of wisdom that is now helping me contemplate how I must change things back home. And the second thing that I'm going to do is be data obsessed.
Yeah.
Because, and we are also very fortunate to be in the business where data is very easily available as compared to your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Which also gives us very high scope to improve and be more efficient. So I'm going to take back these 2 things, and hopefully next day when I come back to you, I must have done something well with both these inputs. Thank you so much, Vedant.
Amazing.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.